What if your next big story idea was just sitting on a sticky note that you almost threw away? Today, we're diving into one of my favorite creative tools. I'm talking about prompts. You know, the small, the strange, the sometimes random sparks that can grow into entire worlds. Because let's be honest, sometimes we don't have the lightning bolt moment where an entire story or a complete creative project just lands in our lap. Sometimes we just have a little flicker, you know, and that's enough to get us started. By the end of this video, you're gonna have 5 techniques that can help you start writing right away, plus a super simple framework that'll help you take these ideas and turn them into bigger stories. So if you've ever stared at a blank page thinking, I have no ideas, this one's for you. Oh, and just a note, I'm gonna be using writing as my creative form of choice, but you can apply these same techniques, the same approach to any creative field, whether that's music or photography, which I used to do, or any kind of art. It's just a method to keep the ideas flowing. For me, prompts are like matches. They don't burn for very long, but they can ignite something much bigger, something much more sustainable, or something that can carry you through. They help you push past the blank page and whatever terror you might associate with that. One of the things I've done for years is collect these tiny little fragments, you know, a line of dialogue I'll overhear at a cafe, or a weird dream, or a picture on Pinterest of someone wearing a lush velvet cloak. None of these things quite feel like stories in and of themselves until they're connected. Now that I'm deep in Preptober, I'm making the most of these sparks. That's just part of my daily warm-up. They remind me that creativity isn't about finding a fully formed idea, but rather it's about finding all these little tiny steps that are worth exploring. So I've been sifting through my inspiration, collecting all these tiny little puzzle pieces and getting them to form the outline of this greater puzzle that I'm working on, which is my next novel. Now, before we get into specific techniques, let's talk about the theory, you know, why prompts even work. Psychologists call one of the processes involved divergent thinking, which is basically your brain's ability to take one starting point and extrapolate and branch out from that in many directions. The more directions that you expand into, the more you explore, the more likely it is that you're going to stumble into something original or something that you like, something that you'd like to dive into. Even things like the Torrance test of creative thinking, and yeah, that's a real thing, which is kind of bizarre, and I'm not sure how credible it is. Anyway, but it's a real thing. This test measures how many different ideas a person can come up with from a single question. Prompts work in the same way. They train this divergent thinking part of your brain into knowing how to expand and come up with more and more and more ideas and keep the excitement going. Also, just giving yourself a little nudge sometimes, like, what if I looked at this differently? Or why does this even matter? Increases the creativity because it keeps your brain in exploration mode rather than judgment mode. All right, now let's get practical. Not all prompts are created equal, and knowing what kind you need for the specific thing you're trying to trigger will help a lot. There are single word prompts. These are my favorite for raw emotional sparks. You know, one word like ember, or mirror, or ghost, or tree, or paper. And then you free associate from there. This works because your brain loves filling in the context. It loves pattern making. So you can just use that as a starting point to keep going and figure out the greater shape around this word. You could even use a random word generator for this, or draw some words from a jar, or open a book and put your finger on a word and go. I recommend you use these when you want raw emotional or sensory seeds. Give them a shot and let me know how it goes. Next, we have visual and sensory prompts. You know, grab an image that intrigues you. Maybe it's a photo of an abandoned greenhouse or a medieval library. Pictures activate more associative memories. Basically, your imagination goes, oh, I know this texture, or this light, or this smell, and it just keeps going from there. Of course, Pinterest is just my favorite tool for this. I have boards like story characters or story locations, and I bet you have similar boards too. As part of this, you could also use physical objects or senses like a warm cup of tea, or, you know, a worn glove that you find discarded on the side of the road, and just ask yourself, what is the secret here? You know, what's happening beyond what I see? This grounds you, and it grounds your ideas in a sense of physicality and in detail. So these get really, really specific. So with that in mind, I recommend you use these visual prompts when you need a concrete scene or a character anchor, something to ground you and let you bring in a lot of detail. Okay, well, this is editing me coming back in because obviously my recording stopped when I was halfway through the types of prompts, and oh my gosh, it's fine. I got lucky today because I'm just editing this a little bit later in the same day, but yeah, I don't like it when that happens. So we just covered prompt types. Number 1, which is single word prompts, and number 2, which is visual and sensory prompts, which leads us to number 3, which is what I like to think of as the Stephen King way of looking at the world. Basically, I'm talking about what if prompts. These are classic story fuel. What if emotions were traded like currency? Or what if houses grew like trees? What if gravity faded for an hour? Or what if memories could only ever be recalled once? They tap into lateral thinking, which is all about finding the unexpected pathways instead of the obvious ones. And these prompts are just great for speculative fiction or genre fiction and twisty ideas. The 4th type of prompt, next up, are dialogue prompts. Try starting from a single line of speech, like, I told you not to open the box, or I never meant to burn down the house. You instantly have attention, you've got character, you're neck deep in the scene, and you've got a voice, a sense of who is speaking. It's like jumping into the middle of a movie scene. Your job is to figure out what's happening overall. These are so great when you want to get to know your characters a little better, because you just have to let them go crazy on the page and hear what they have to say. Last but not least, you've got constraints as prompts. These happen when you combine 2 things that don't belong together. So things like a tea ceremony on Mars, or a detective who can only speak in song. These constraints push your creative boundaries and push your limits sideways, you know, not just forward, but sideways into a whole different way of thinking about something. Psychologists call this the creativity constraint theory, where boundaries actually improve originality because they force problem solving. So I'd recommend you use these when you're coming up with general ideas or little interesting moments. So just, they're more broad scope. I was trying to think of a couple, like, what if we had polar bears that could fit in teacups and people were trading them as pets, you know, things like that. Just put 2 things together that you wouldn't normally add up and see what happens. How do you go from the single spark into a fully fleshed out story idea, or at least something that's closer to it? Well, let me walk you through a super simple type of prompt branching, a process that I use to take these sparks and turn them into stories. It's just 6 steps. And step 1 is to free write. You know, if your prompt is a single word prompt, for example, mirror, let's pick that as our prompt for this exercise. Let's go for mirror. Free write for 5 minutes based on the single word, and just write everything that comes to mind, whether that's, you know, reflection, identity, truth, doppelganger, whatever. Write that, and don't edit, just get the ideas down on the page one after the other. That's step 1. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna set a 5-minute timer here. And we're gonna write. We're gonna start with 5 minutes. That's it. Now, go. And we're gonna write based off of mirror. All right, timer's done. That went by way faster than I was expecting. 5 minutes just blew by. So now we move on to step 2, which is to ask why and what if. So why does this mirror matter? Is it a specific mirror, or is it the idea of mirrors in general? What if it doesn't reflect people? It only reflects their secrets. I had a lot of what ifs in mine. Like some of my favorites were about what if when a mirror breaks, each of the shards holds a possible future for you, and by choosing a shard or by accidentally cutting yourself on one, you end up choosing that future. Even if you can't fully see it, you just see parts of it. Or what if the mirror stopped reflecting who you are, but rather they were showing who you could be? What about funhouse mirrors or mirrors that distort your reflection? What if all mirrors show us this false reality? They don't actually depict anything real, but rather they show some twisted or convoluted version. So just keep going with the whys and the what ifs and free associate from there and see where that takes you, which takes us to step 3, which is to start grouping ideas. You know, maybe some of these things that you've written down are character-based, or maybe some are world-based, like, you know, the possibility that shards hold your future. That's a world-based thing, whereas the idea that a mirror could just reflect a different side of your character, if it's reflecting on your secrets, that's a character-based idea. So start grouping these things and you're going to naturally see some clusters start to form. Step 4 is to choose the emotional core, you know, that thing that you want to resonate with your readers or your viewers. Is it fear? Is it longing? Is it curiosity? It's the emotion that tells you what kind of story you're shaping. You know, it's the thing underneath the premise. A lot of the ideas I was rambling about here have to do with identity and distortion and misperception, vanity, beauty, you know, whether someone's beautiful and whether that idea of what is beautiful is linked with the evolution of mirrors historically. I don't know, but find that emotional chord and use that as your grounding point for the themes and ideas you're going to use in the rest of the story. Step 5 is to let the ideas simmer. You know, put them on the back burner. V. Schwab has this analogy that I absolutely adore, where she's got, you know, a hob in the kitchen, a stovetop for anyone from America. Or is it reverse? I don't remember. But you've got this cooking top, the stovetop, and you've got several pots boiling at the same time. And you've got some on high heat and some on lower heat. And at this stage, I'd invite you to put these ideas on lower heat to let them simmer away. You know, walk away from it, go take a shower, go for a walk, go take a breather, work on something else, and then come back to it, because your brain is working on this in the background. This is actually a proven thing in creative research called incubation theory. So when you come back to it, more of the pieces will have clicked into place, which takes us to step 6, which is to revisit the ideas, you know, stir the pot once in a while until the story starts to emerge. For some people, this process takes a day or a week or a month. It's quick. For others, it takes years. Like the story I'm currently working on, this novel that I'm prepping during Preptober, started off as a what if question about 4 years ago. And that slowly started getting more and more ingredients thrown into the pot over time, until I recently reread The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and things just started clicking and falling into place from there, because I knew the emotional arc that I wanted the character to go through. We're talking about a descent into madness, an inner monster kind of story. So after reading that, I felt that I found the piece that was missing. It was the piece that I needed to be able to push forward. So there it is. After 6 steps, you've got the first glimmer of a story. You've got something to put on the stovetop and something to keep mulling over and working on. It's quite simple, but it works, it's effective. And now I'm kind of getting distracted by my mere ideas. Usually another thing you can do at this stage is to make it visual. I love making things visual in a physical world. So I'll take sticky notes. I've got piles of post-it notes all over the room. And I use these to see the patterns and the physical shape of the story. I stick them up on the walls and just move them around to find where the pieces slot in together best. It helps me notice things that I may have missed, you know, gaps and other things like that. And remember that if you feel like you don't know where this is going, that's totally normal, that's fine. Many first sparks need time to either evolve into a story, or they may just transform into something else. And they may be weird. The task here is to follow them, not to judge them, not to assess their value, but just to get the creativity going. So let's try a little creative challenge together. Grab a notebook, grab a pen, or open a document on your computer or a note on your phone or something. And I'm gonna give you 3 prompts. We're gonna write for 1 minute each. No editing, no deleting, no backspace. Forget that even exists. We're just gonna free write. I'm even gonna put up a timer on this video for you to follow through. And I'm sure you're gonna hear my own alarm go off when the time passes. Are you ready? So the first prompt is a door that opens only once. Let's go. All right, that's the minute. Finish your sentence. Yeah. Prompt number 2 is, what if the last light in the forest just went out? Let's go. time's up. Wrap up what you're writing. So that was a what if based prompt, and they are probably my favorite. Prompt number 3 is someone is waiting for a letter that never comes. Let's go. Right. Now, look over your notes, look over what you wrote, and pick one line, just something that feels alive. It might be a phrase, it might be an image or a description, just something that made you curious. That right there is your spark. And drop your favorite in the comments below. I'd love to see what you came up with. My favorite, I mean, I have quite a few actually, but one that stood out is, it was death's turn now. Life would have to take a back seat. So sometimes prompts backfire. They either make you feel overwhelmed or you just sit there staring at it and you feel blank. Well, if you freeze, take the smallest possible version of the prompt. So instead of write a story about time travel, zoom in on something like a clock that flows backwards, just to focus on a little detail and then extrapolate from there. If you're judging everything that you write, remember that this is just the start. It's a spark, and perfectionism just kills curiosity. So tell yourself, maybe over and over and over again, that I'm just playing. This doesn't have to be good. This is just for fun. It's okay for it to be messy. It's okay for it to be, you know, a shitty first draft. That's okay. And you might have to tell yourself this over and over again, but try. One of the things that help me is I'll use scrap paper or post-it notes or a notebook that I don't care about really, because that just reinforces the idea that this doesn't have to be polished. This doesn't have to be good. And if you have too many ideas, well, congrats. That's a great problem to have. Just circle or underline the one that feels most charged, the one that's resonating the most with you, and use that as your starter. Sometimes I like focusing on the one that scares me or excites me or intrigues me the most, because those are the ones that I feel are worth following more. Prompts aren't about pressure. They're here to help. They remind us that stories don't always have to start big. They can just start small. You know, one word, one image, one spark, that's all it takes. But anyway, let me know in the comments what kind of prompt spoke to you the most today. I love seeing how your creativity can get sparked and come to life. And if you found today's video helpful, hit that like button. It might just summon the algorithm gods to my side. Next week, we're going to go into the behind the scenes of my novel prep, you know, sharing the ups and downs and the journey, what I've gotten done so far, where I thought I'd be versus where I am, things like that. So if that's something you're curious about, subscribe if you haven't already. And remember, every great story just started with a single spark.